In this lesson, we'll start to add just a few more details to our texture by using normal map stamps. Now these are quite similar to painting and height information, but instead we're going to be using normal maps for our details. Now, if you're not familiar with normal maps and want to look into it a little bit further, they're widely used in the game industry and game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine. This time, we're going to do things a little bit differently. So I'll create an empty layer this time and name it normal detail. And in my paintbrush settings, I'm going to disable all the channels except for the normal channel. So what I'm left with is this blue color, and which in a normal map won't do anything. So instead, we can place a stamp here. Now, your normal map stamps are located in the shelf, and if you're not familiar with these, they're the images that have a blue color with some rainbow shading. An easy way to filter these images is by clicking on the filter editor and choose filter by paths. And they're going to be located under textures, hard surface, and there's also some subcategories just to make things a little bit easier. Now let's go and set one of these up correctly on our brush. To use one, you want to drag and drop it onto the normal channel of your brush. So let's start under miscellaneous, and I'll use panel 01 and I'll drag it onto the normal. To effectively use one of these, there are just a few parameters that you want to set to get the best result. So I'll remove any alpha off my brush, that way we can get the full stamp without any fading around the edges. And for those of you using a tablet, you want to disable the pen pressure in the size setting. This way your stamp will be consistent the whole way through. And just be sure that your flow is always set to 100 and start to stamp onto our model. Now let's try a different one. I'll go to the base shapes and pick capsule. Now this one acts a little bit differently than the previous one. You'll notice we actually have some parameters to play around with here. We can change the capsule length, the bevel thickness, and even the mode, which will allow us to push either in or extrude out from the mesh. Now, not all of these textures have these parameters, but the ones that do definitely experiment with some different shapes and sizes. At any point, if you're stamping, you can always switch to the erase tool by pressing 2 and erase what you've painted. I'll go ahead and just erase what we did, and whenever we do any type of stamping in detail, it's always a good idea to enable the shadows, as this will really let you see the effect a little bit more while we're stamping. So one thing about doing stamps quickly and efficiently is understanding your hotkeys when stamping. So don't forget that you can use the bracket keys to adjust the size, but another trick is you can actually hold the control key while left clicking and dragging the mouse, and this will allow you to rotate the stamp. Alternatively, you can hold control and right click and drag the mouse, and that'll also adjust the size. So a combination of these keys will allow you to quickly detail a model. Now I'm going to speed things up a little bit and go through the detailing phase here, and I'm not going to be doing anything that's out of the ordinary. I'll only be using a handful of different stamps as I go through the detail work, and that's simply to keep the same design language throughout. If you want to think about it, this is the same manufacturer, so you'll see a consistency in the bolts and paneling used. You'll also notice I'm just using a lot of vent stamps. The half capsule is also great too. Here I'll use it on the head and just erase the portion I don't want. On the back, I'm not going to be doing too much work, but I'll always try to ground some of my objects so they don't look like just sunken into the mesh. Of course, at some point, you want to turn off symmetry and do some asymmetrical stamps. Here I'm using the container stamp to add a little hatch that could be opened up. And here, just using some more vents on the antenna ball. I'm also trying not to get too finicky with these making sense. They're really there just to imply detail. So we can start to work on the legs now. I'll go onto the leg texture set and do the same thing, create a layer, call it normal detail, and start the process all over again. I won't be doing too much to the leg since it's not the main focus of the render. Always do pockets of detail and try not to overwhelm the viewer's eye with too much information. And as I'm going through, I'm using the same stamps as we did for the head just to keep the language the same. And don't let the vent name fool you, just pick something that looks cool. And play with the light as the light rolls over it, just to add some visual interest. And when we're done, I'm just going to hit Tab to go to full screen mode, and just make sure all the details are balanced out. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to add another layer of detail, this time by placing decal stamps.